Very good morning to all the students of class 5. My name is Prerna and I'm your English teacher. And today, from your English book Skyline, we are going to read chapter number 8. Now tell me one thing, how many of you like clicking photographs, taking selfies? Most of us enjoy that. How many of you like clicking family photographs? So why do we click photographs? uh, why do we have this tradition, or why do we have this trend of clicking photographs? So for me, photographs act like chronicles, they act like memories of a beautiful time that we've spent together with our loved ones. Now just imagine that you are having a look at family photographs, and suddenly you see your grandparents photograph as a childhood. So how interesting would that be? So this chapter number 8, is about a photograph. So let us find out whose photograph this is. So let us start reading this chapter, which is chapter number 8 of your book. So here we go. So chapter number 8 of your book, and the title of the chapter is The Photograph. The name of the chapter is The Photograph. So let us start reading this chapter now. I was 10 years old. My grandmother sat on the string bed under the mango tree. It was late summer, and there were sunflowers in the garden and a warm wind in the trees. My grandmother was knitting a woolen scarf for the winter months. She was very old, dressed in plain white sari. Her eyes were not very strong now, but her fingers moved quickly with the needles, and the needles kept clicking all afternoon. Grandmother had white hair, but there were very few wrinkles on her skin. I was back in Dehra. Dehra here refers to Dehradun. I was back in Dehra for my vacations from boarding schools. I had come home after playing cricket on the Maidan. I had taken my meal, and now I was rummaging in a box of old books and family heirlooms. So now now this little boy is saying that I had just come for a vacation, and I had gone to play in the Maidan, and I was doing something. So what was this boy doing? Let us see to it. So this boy says, I had taken my meal, and now I was rummaging in a box of old books and family heirlooms. So what is the meaning of rummaging? It means to search for something carelessly. Just open a box and you start looking for something. A family of heirlooms means a precious article which is passed on through generations in a family. So it could be an object, or anything which is passed on from one generation to another. So these books were those precious articles which were being passed from one generation to another. The box had certain books in it. Okay, nothing in the box interested me very much, except for a book with colorful pictures of birds and butterflies. I was going through the book, looking at the pictures, when I found a small photograph between the pages. It was faded picture and little yellow and foggy. So it was unclear. The picture, one could not make out looking at the picture that if one looked at the photograph, one could not really see the photograph very clearly. So it was a little blur. It was the picture of a girl standing against a wall, and behind the wall there was nothing but sky. But from the other side, a pair of hands reached up as though someone was going to climb the wall. There were flowers growing near the girl, but I could not tell what they were. There was a creeper too, but it was just a creeper. So now the boy started looking at this photograph, and he wanted to know who is this little girl, and she's standing against the wall, and there's only sky above her. There are some flowers. I don't know exactly what flowers are these. So this boy, what did he do? I ran out into the garden. Granny, I shouted, look at this picture. I found it in the box of old things. Whose picture is it? I jumped on the bed beside my grandmother, and she walloped me on the bottom and said, now I have lost count of my stitches. And next time you do that, I will make sure you finish the scarf yourself. So can you see this granny? She is knitting a scarf. So when you are knitting, you need to count the number of looms that you've put, because so there are a different number of looms for a sweater, for a scarf. So now she was counting, and now she just forgot that how many looms she had put in. So she said to this boy, now I'm going to make you finish the scarf. I've lost this count once again. Granny was always threatening to teach me how to knit. Once I had torn the drawing room curtains, and Granny had put a needle and thread in my hand and made me stitch the curtain together, even though I could only make long 2-inch stitches, which had to be taken out by Granny and done again. She took the photograph from my hand, and we both stared at it for quite a long time. The girl had long, loose hair, and she wore a long dress that nearly covered her ankles and sleeves that reached her wrist, and there were a lot of bangles on her hands. But despite all this drapery, the girl appeared to be full of freedom and movement. She stood with her legs apart and her hands on her hips, and a wide, almost devilish smile on her face. So now the boy has described the physical appearance of the girl, that she had long, loose hair, and she was wearing those loose clothes. She was draped in loose clothes, but she had a very devilish smile, a very wicked, a very naughty kind of a smile. Whose picture is it? I asked. A little girl's, of course, said the grandmother. Can't you tell? Yes, I knew her, said Granny. But she was a very wicked girl, and I shouldn't tell you about her. But I will tell you about the photograph. So now the grandmother is telling about the photograph. It was taken about 60 years ago in front of the garden wall. Whose hand are they? I asked. Coming up from the other side? Grandmother squinted, so she looked very close. When you look at something very closely, what happens? Your eyeballs, they generally come in the center. That's called squinting. So grandmother squinted and looked closely at the picture and shook her head. It's the first time I've noticed, she said. They must have been the sweeper boys, or maybe they were your grandfathers. They don't look like grandfather's hands, I said. His hands are all bony. So this little boy, his grandfather's hands were always very bony, So according to him, there was hardly any skin on his grandfather's hands, since even during his grandfather's childhood. Yes, but this was 60 years ago. Didn't he climb up the wall after the photo? No, nobody climbed up. At least I don't remember. And what about the girl? I said. Tell me about the girl. Well, she was a wicked girl, said Granny. You don't know the trouble they had getting her into those fine clothes she's wearing. I think they're terrible clothes, I said. So did she. Most of the time, she hardly wore a thing. She used to swimming in a muddy pool with a lot of roughened boys and ride on the back of buffaloes. No boy ever teased her, though, because she could kick and scratch and pull his hair out. Roughened refers to ill-mannered. boys. She looks like it too, I said. So now the boy is saying that yes, this girl looks very bold, and someone who could not be, people would not mess around with this girl. You can tell by the way she's smiling. So the boy is saying that this girl has a wicked smile. So you can one can make out that this girl was difficult to deal with. At any moment, something's going to happen. Something did happen, said Granny. Her mother wouldn't let her take off the clothes afterwards, so she went swimming in them and lay for half an hour in the mud. I laughed heartily, and grandmother laughed too. Who was the girl? I said. You must tell me who she was. No, that wouldn't do, said Granny. I won't tell you. I knew the girl in the photo was real Granny, but I pretended I did not know. Pretended means to act like, to act like as if you don't know something. I knew grandmother still smiled in the same way. Come on, Granny. I said, tell me. But grandmother shook her head and carried on with the knitting. And I held the photograph in my hand, looking from it to my grandmother and back again, trying to find points in common between the old lady and the little pigtailed girl. A lemon-colored butterfly settled on the end of grandmother's knitting needle and stayed there while the needles clicked away. So now this boy was holding the photograph in his hand. So he was looking at the photograph, then he would look at his grandmother. He was looking at the photograph, then again he would look at the grandmother to find out, or to locate the common features. I made a grab at the butterfly and it flew off in a dipping flight and settled on a sunflower. I wonder whose hands they are, whispered grandmother to herself with her head bowed and her needles clicking away in the soft warm silence of that summer afternoon. Bowed means bent, so even grandmother was curious to know that whose hands were there on the wall. So now I'm sure all of you enjoyed reading this story. So next time try and find out the photographs of your parents or maybe your grandparents, or of the maybe their childhood photographs or of their college days, and see if you can find any similarity between their childhood photograph and what they look now. Trust me, it's a very interesting thing to do. I hope all of you enjoyed reading this chapter. Thank you so much.